You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
All right, here we go. The sky was falling a week ago. The Leafs are on fire once again, presented by Bet365. It's the Friday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga, and I hope a well-rested Jay Rosehill. What's going on, Rosie?
Not well rested. As I told you before the show, I had a headache at 3 a.m, and I'm the opposite of well rested. Thanks, Nick. But it was a good game.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah, at least they won the game. That's terrible news on your front, but at least they won the game, so there is a silver lining. Open account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. That's NATION, N-A-T-I-O-N. Our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. As you all know, want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and 3rd in the world. But it sure does feel different when the Maple Leafs win out west and it happens at like 1 a.m. Eastern time, man. People are sleeping when it happens. I'm feeling good about life today, Rosie.
That is a late one for you folks out east. It was late enough for me. I'm sitting around waiting for the bloody game to start. And I mean, 10 p.m. out east, man, that's brutal. But I mean, that right there is why they changed the times for the Saturday night games, like in Edmonton and what's going to happen here on Saturday in Vancouver. Sorry, rest of the world, but that is a huge market with the majority of TV audiences that bring in the most money out in Toronto, and they want to watch the game at 7. So I remember the 4 p.m. starts and whatnot in Vancouver. It was weird, and the locals around there are not very happy about it, especially when you fill half their barn with your fans. But it's just it's funny the way the Leafs travel, man.
I was going to ask you, how does the body react as a professional athlete, specifically, obviously, a hockey player when you have to go out west? Yeah, I know as just a normal person, when I go out there, I'm a little gassed, but that's my issue because I can't sleep on planes. I know it's probably different for some guys.
Yeah, if you can't sleep on planes, it can be tough. I mean, you're going out west sometimes and you're crossing several time zones. It's difficult. Oftentimes, especially the Leafs, they have the money and the means to to get you out there early if the schedule provides, and they do everything you can to make you comfortable. But yeah, there's lots of times where you're tired and you're groggy and you're trying to get an extra warm up in. You have a cold shower in your hotel room, just like wakey, do what you can to get going. But honestly, for me anyway, I've been in the minors, I've ridden on buses through the night and grinded it out with horrendous schedules in the American Hockey League, and you do what you can, like I said, but when the puck drops, I honestly you forget what time it is. You forget that you were tired before. The adrenaline starts going. Once you get that sweat on and kind of get your first bang and hit in the game, it seems like that stuff all goes away. It's more mental than anything.
It's funny you bring up the AHL. The schedule a lot more lax than it was when you played in the AHL, where it was like, what was it, like 3-3 or 4-4? Like, it was utterly ridiculous. I'm like, what, they can't play on Mondays or Tuesdays or?
Yeah, it was 3-3s were the norm, and 4-5s you'd play Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you look at these show guys like goaltenders can't play. Like I was, talking to you before the show about like, man, should Stoli play again on Saturday? And it's like, no, he played 2 days ago. It's like, man, we'd have a goalie play 3 games in a row, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that Sunday one was off the matinee, so just the quickest turnaround ever. And if you're scrapping and fighting, if you're traveling during that, and I played in some divisions where you're on the sleeper bus like through the night and whatnot. It was a grind. And I always laugh when people are like, we want equal pay and we want equal pay for this, and it's like, for what? You're not Nathan McKinnon, you're not Connor McDavid. Why would you get paid the same amount as them? And then some people are like, well, we do the same job. Well, what about the guys in the minor leagues? They're grinding it out, they're scrapping, they're riding the buses, they're sleeping in shitty hotels, they're eating shitty food, the exact same job. But why would they get the same amount of money as Austin Matthews? Why? You don't bring in the money, it's just an economical thing. It always blows my mind, because it's like some people think they're the only people who aren't paid the same as the most important people in the world, and they just don't understand how it works. And I always look at like the minor league guys and how they grind and don't really bitch. They understand you got to make it to the big show.
Well, you look at what some of the donkeys in the NBA make, and you understand why people get upset about the whole conversation. But nevertheless, Rosie, lots to discuss on today's podcast. I don't know if you saw this, but Daily Faceoff put off a piece yesterday about potential salary cap casualties. It is that time of year, the trade deadline on March 7th. From Toronto, they listed Max Domi, who's got 3 years left at 3.75, and David Kampf, who has 2 years left at 2.4 mil per season. What do you make of that?
I'm just curious as to dump it. How are you dumping it? Put it into the mine. Just put it in the minors. Is
It's
that
a
what
double-decker dump, when you, open the top at a party and you take a dump in that part?
up,
That's
upper decker?
upper,
That's a nice
yeah.
treat for the
I
next
said double-decker. It's an upper decker,
upper
excuse me.
decker. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously Domi's not pulling his weight as much as people would have hoped, and they're trying to get him going. Obviously, the last couple games playing on that top line, I just don't see a whole lot. Like if he does, he'll jump on a puck with some space in a sweet spot, and it seems like he'll either miss the net or bury it right in the breadbasket, right in the guy's chest. He doesn't seem to really have that snipe mentality, and I know what that feels like. You get it and you grip the stick a little bit too hard and go, oh, crap, here we go. And it's tough to pinpoint that thing under pressure, and it doesn't seem like he's getting any alleviation from that. He's kind of the same out there regardless of who he's playing with. But yeah, he makes a good chunk of money. And David Kampf, I think most of us scratched our head when they signed him. He's kind of a fringe guy, kind of a reliable face-off PK guy, his own zone type of thing, fourth line guy, which you can live with, but he makes more money than that. And I think, right now we're looking at, I just wonder, you need to dump cap. You need to get rid of it. I don't know what he means if someone's going to take on some salary or someone that's not in the mix anymore, but what are they going to do that for? What do you like? Nothing's for free in the NHL. You have to, provide something to someone who's going to do you a service. And, I think we got $1.3 million in space, and Calle Ehrenkrok's coming off the books here sooner than later from what we hear. He makes 2.1. So things need to happen. Things need to change. But when everyone's talking about these $5-6 million guys and whether we should take them or not, I don't think they're factoring in how difficult that's going to be. Like, where are you going to make room in the salary cap? Like, we're right up against it as it is. And we know what that's because of. I mean, we have a bottom six that isn't that talented and doesn't produce that much because our top six makes so much bloody money. And you even have the Bobby McMahons and the Matthew Nyes of the world who are super underpaid and are looking phenomenal, and we're still in cap trouble. That's what happens when you give four guys so much money. It is what it is. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
Fred Godson writes in, great name, by the way, Nick. Your jokes are never funny. You always ruin Rosie's points, so I apologize, Rosie, for doing that. Happy Friday to you, Fred, you grumpy fuck.
Oh, Fred, take some heat back. I love it.
The only thing I will say on that front, I agree with you. This notion that Max Domi is going anywhere, I think, is ludicrous. Like, you don't just pull the cord because, again, like, I don't know. I would give it at least until the summer. Like Craig Berube and Max Domi and the Ty Domi connection. Like, I want to see how Max looks in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And on top of that, who the hell's taking that contract right now? You're not stuck with him. Like, I like the player. I think he's got to snap out of this. It's news to the analytics community, by the way. I saw the numbers overwhelmingly in favor of that top line with Domi, Matthews, and Nyes. The numbers proved or showed that they dominated last night. So I'm going to stick with that. I like the fact that they mix things up, and I think that has to be sort of a thing they're looking at moving forward, whether it's in Vancouver or after the Four Nations. Got to get Domi cooking. If you can, then you suddenly have potentially three lines here.
I know, and they're trying, and it would be ideal if Domi played. He played better last year, and there's been times in a Maple Leafs uniform where he's more effective. And I know he's not burying the puck, and he hasn't scored in like 20 games, and he's probably got this monkey on his back. And the further along that goes with the guy, the more it gets in your head, and the more you might do things that are like out of character, just trying to create something. But that's all fine and dandy. I think everybody's been there. But what about the physicality of it? What about trying to, create things in other dimensions? Like, people talk about, if you're in a slump, you got to go out there and try to get a big hit and forecheck like crazy and just get involved in other ways. And he has the capability to do it. Like, he's a tough kid. I remember when he knock out, was it Bieksa or Kessler or something a while ago, like when he was really young, and he had this scrappy mentality and he finished his hits, and he's kind of like that little small bulldog, a little bit of his dad in him. I mean, to a degree, obviously, but don't see him doing other things like that, trying to make it work. And I would just like to see his production in any way, shape, or form come up. And they're trying to help him with that by putting him with these top players, trying to break something loose. And I really hope that it works at some point in time, because there are a lot of examples where a guy, you just need one thing to fall, one domino to fall, and the levee will break, and I think he's looking for that, but it's yet to be seen right now. And yeah, he's taken up cap space for what he's providing out there. And I don't know if DFO's talking about, like, do you just put these guys on waivers if you want to make a deal for someone else? The Leafs don't give a shit about how much money they have to pay. It's about cap room. And if you put them on waivers and they clear, I guess they're off the cap then. And is that an option? I don't think they're that low on Domi yet, but I don't know. I just don't understand how you're going to make these moves that people are talking about.
Yeah, Darley needed anything from one of those two guys. Never mind, a guy like David Camp, but certainly Max Domi. I should mention as well, the Daily Faceoff live crew is hitting the road and going live on location from the Four Nations Faceoff, bringing you exclusive coverage right from the tournament. From February 10th to 20th, they'll be offering live shows every weekday, breaking down the biggest stories, key matchups, and all the action as it unfolds. Subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel and follow on all social platforms today. Now the intrigue, Rosie. I had to call you about this last night. Braden Shen. Sounds like there's a chance Braden Shen could be out there via trade. He's got, 3 years left at $6.5 million. This come via Darren Dreger on insider trading of TSN. That's a spicy meatball, my friend.
Oh, that is. I am pretty high on the Shen boys. We talk on this show about trying to get guys that can play with that grit, and these younger players that are coming up. And most, scouts and GMs and whatnot say we can't find these guys. They don't exist anymore. It's just not in their DNA from this younger generation, and they don't value that kind of thing a lot of the times. And then you look at like a Braden Shen, who, when I was playing, seemed like one of those younger guys making his way through LA, who drafted him, high draft pick, and still played with that Sasky grit, and now he's a veteran and a cup winner and a captain of his team. And I guess he's kind of getting to the point where he's part of the old guard. But there's a guy who can, understand what a playoff grind feels like, understands the momentum of a game and what a team needs when they're flat. He's a guy that's selfless in the fact that he'll step up for his teammates, whether, it's a guy that's out of his weight class or a guy that's, he'll scrap guys that primarily do that type of thing. And he's like the captain, leader, goal scoring centerman of his team, and he'll show up and fight that guy. He'll bang and crash. And I really love that identity. I think the Leafs have been missing it in years past. I think they've done a lot to try to address it in recent years here, but a guy like him would be a phenomenal addition. Again, how do you fit his 5 point something
6.5, yeah,
cap? How 6.5, and what do you give up to even have St. Louis give you him? Like, he's an asset to them. They don't give him for nothing. They're not furious with him. He's not this disaster in St. Louis. They're just thinking of shaking it up as their season hasn't gone that well. But what do you give up for him? I don't know. I mean, if Treliving can pull off a move where you get a guy like Braden Shen and move guys off of our roster, guys that we've talked about who make too much money and don't really, produce a whole lot, and you can open up a hole in the cap to get a Braden Shen here, I mean, that would just be phenomenal. I think Tree would look like an absolute genius if he could move like a Domi in a Camp or something like that, or a Robertson, or so. Like, it's just not happening. But if people legitimately think this can work, it's going to be something like that. And I just, you always got to put yourself in the shoes of, in this case, the St. Louis Blues, and say, well, what the hell is in it for them to make a deal like that? And then you just start running short of bodies and players to start to think that this could work. So I don't know. I'm very skeptical on it the more I think about it. But I'm not a cap genius guy. I'm not a big trade center guy, but I'm just trying to figure out, okay, well, why and how are these things going to work? And hopefully I'm pleasantly surprised. But
the good news is that this is two proactive general managers in Doug Armstrong and St. Louis, who's not afraid to think outside the box, and Brad Treliving's involved in every damn conversation. On top of that, there's the correlation. Braden's brother, of course, we know, took 2 stops in Toronto. If somebody would know well, it's obviously Luke, about what the market, what it means. He's got full no trade protection, I believe. And on top of that, he won a Stanley Cup with Craig Berube. He's the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, there's a reason, I think, why he is linked already to the Toronto Maple Leafs. On paper, I agree with you. He makes just so much sense. You slot him behind Matthews and Tavares, and suddenly you're in business with a third line. I think it's going to be tough hurdle wise. I think a lot of teams would want to be involved in a guy like Braden Shen, but I honestly feel like Toronto could have the upper hand. It's to your point more about what can they give up? How can they get that salary in there is the question.
I know, no first round pick this year. It hurts, right? Other people have that sweetener, which is, first round pick. I'm not certain how deep the draft is this year, but depending on, who we're talking about. And the Leafs are obviously kind of top 5 in the league, somewhere around there. So that pick isn't going to be, a third overall. But th- those guys, getting those guys coming down the barrel is pretty good news for general managers, right? To have some prospects coming down your pipeline. I mean, you're thinking about your job and you're thinking about long term and you're thinking about the long term success of your franchise. To not have anyone coming down the barrel is kind of scary because it's like, well, if we run out of X or if we lose so and so to free agency, like where are we going to be in the standings and how is this market going to take that? And if there's no one coming in to, blossom and to be on an entry level contract and to start helping the team out immediately, all of a sudden you're in cap trouble, you can't compete, and then the GM's job's on the line. So you think about that kind of thing. It's difficult to give away those first rounders, but we do have a 2026 first rounder. I don't know. I can't think of Tree Living making too big of a splash and filling the holes he needs to without getting rid of that pick. And I don't know where his mind's at as far as having no first round pick for two years is a tough prospect to look at. But yeah, that 3C, that's all it would take is one. Everyone knows what we need. We need a right-handed defenseman and we need a 3C. How we get those is a different story, but all of a sudden you look at our lineup and our bottom 6 and you get a Braden Shen in there, the 3C right under Johnny T, and all of a sudden it's like, oh baby, we're rolling the lines now, and everyone kind of has their clear defined roles, and we know where to go to when we have this situation, and we know what this guy's role is on this line, and it shapes it up a lot better. And we'll see if Tree can get something done like that. But it's just funny. There's just no secret what this team needs at this point. Everyone's talking about 3C and right-handed D.
Yeah, it's deja vu all over again, which we talked about ad nauseum with Brian Hayes of TSN earlier this week. The first ever TLN Nation vacation is just around the corner. We're headed to Nashville from Thursday, March 20th to Sunday, March 23rd. Would love it, by the way, if a lot of you folks in the chat could join us. It would be great to put a face to those of you who chime in on a daily basis. We love you. In addition to supplying your ticket to the Toronto-Nashville game on the Saturday night, we'll be hosting a live podcast for all of you at the Love and Exile Winery and Bar in East Nashville. And yes, a winery tour will be part of the experience as well. We're offering 2 packages, one with flights, $24.50 plus tax, one without, $12.99 plus tax. It is spring break, by the way. Hotel rooms are double occupancy. For more information on how to book, head on over to nationgear.ca or check out the link in our show bio. Again, nationgear.ca. Life's too short for ordinary vacations. Getting closer and closer, my friend, and also getting closer to today's guest, long-time legendary news anchor in this beautiful nation, Peter Mansbridge, who's a massive Leafs fan, has come about here, Rosie.
I know. I think we had him on season 1 of Leafs Morning Take, and just hearing his voice is it's such a familiar voice
of a nation.
Exactly. He's such a familiar face on the National. Maybe not for so many young people who maybe didn't watch the news or the National at that point in time, but he was the voice for a long time. And as we know, big time Leafs fans. So we'll pick his brain about where he thinks people are and see how into it his head is. And maybe he's got his cap circumvention ideas.
Possibly. At the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. So nice, tidy 3-1 victory in Seattle. I felt bad for Zach Phillips last night. I was texting with him after the game. He had the Maple Leafs team over 3.5, and Willie Nylander pooped all over himself. The puck, he was fighting the puck all night long. Had a potential for an empty netter, scores at the buzzer, but it was after the final buzzer. And so it's not 4-1, it's 3-1. But nevertheless, Rosie, I thought it was a professional effort last night for the Leafs.
Vegas gets you again, Zachy boy. Hey, man, I swear those guys are psychic. It must be an algorithm by this point where they put it into AI and every game and situation with all the stats of every player and their performance against that specific team and that goalie, and they just crunch it all together and it spits out a line. because it's incredible how good Vegas is on picking these things. And Zach took the wrong side of it there, obviously. But yeah, nonetheless, solid game. Started on time. Got some scoring from around the lineup, specifically Myers there gets one. And it's been since my kids were watching the highlights this morning while having breakfast going, he hasn't scored since 2022. Like they couldn't believe it. I'm like, not everyone scores every night, boys. There's other aspects of the game, which I guess they're still learning, and that's on me. But, solid little game. I thought it was kind of maybe ripe to come up and have an average effort or not really start on time or take this team lightly. And it didn't seem like they did that. And again, the big story for me is Stoley picking up right where he left off. He just looks so big and sharp in there, man. Those huge pads and that big torso. I mean, I was at that Calgary game and you look at Wolf in net for the Calgary Flames and he has to fricking stand up and play Rick Wamsley style of hockey just to not go top shelf on him. And Stoley can be in full butterfly and his shoulders are above the crossbar. It's phenomenal, man. I was a little concerned, not concerned, but just wanting to see how Stoley looked after we talked yesterday about how much time he had taken off. You're starting to look at 8, 9, and 10. Like, what the hell? It's a lot of weeks, and that's a long time to be off. And he just, again, picked up right where he left off, which was just such a welcome sight for Leafs fans.
Very athletic for his size too,
Yeah.
right? Like the way he moves to be a goalie at that size is pretty difficult, but makes 26 saves in his return and didn't skip a beat, man. I watched that first period and specifically the first 5 to 6 minutes, Seattle all over the Leafs.
The first
Sometimes
shift,
yeah,
it
they're
was like
buzzing.
gross.
Yeah, they're
Same
buzzing.
thing in Calgary too. Like first, I was like, oh god, but like whatever. You lose the opening draw and the team pours it on and you kind of weather the storm. It is what it is. I don't think it's indicative of having like a bad start, but that's 2 games in a row where it was just like Pepper City. My oldest kid was like, oh my God, rough start here. I'm like, yeah, even the 11-year-old can see that. But yeah, I agree with that. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's all good. Like I think weathering the storm, you need that sometimes. And for a guy who hasn't played, and you mentioned it, 6 to 7 weeks to come up big. I thought he made a big stop in the third period where I think it was Tanev almost went 5-hole on him because he didn't have his stick. Like you just opportunistic. You got to get saves at the right time. And the Leafs are an even better team, I would say, when they have a two-headed monster, when they have the confidence in Woll. They have Stolarz there too. You go back and forth, and they play off each other so well. But yeah, that's the biggest positive aside from the win. Stolarz comes back, and Stolarz looks like the same guy from earlier this season. That's great.
Yeah, big time. He seems to lose his stick a lot. Hey, I don't
Every goalie
remember that
does, though,
when
man.
I was playing with him. I don't know. My memory is average at best, but I can't quite remember him losing his stick. He loses it all the time. I was like, there was one game he lose like 4 times in a game. And it's like, what the hell? But he's scrambling around. He's trying to be everywhere at the same time. But no, in my mind, if the playoffs start tomorrow, Anthony Stolarz is the starting goaltender.
I agree.
That's nothing against Woll, but he just looks sharper and he looks quicker and he looks like sometimes when he comes out and he just wants to gobble it. He's like, give me that puck, as opposed to where's the puck? You can just see the confidence and in his movement, and he's everywhere and he's large. And like you say, he's athletic. And trying to think back playing with him, like we'll play soccer, kick around, sewer ball, whatever you want to call it, before the games. And he was always a part of that. And he's a big, long body. And yeah, he can move well. And I didn't really notice it at the time, but I look at him now paying attention probably more than when he's my own goalie, but he's just this monster in there. And those big black pads are just always in the position. It doesn't seem like the team has much to shoot at. If he needs to scramble, he can, and he gets his limbs in the way, that big glove save and that, when he's laying down that blocker save on the side of the net. And like you say, he makes like 3 of those big saves. Like the margins for a goaltender in the NHL are so thin. They all could play the exact same, but 2 of those 3 big saves, the one goalie doesn't make, and you lose the game by 1 or 2, and they're talking about him being kind of average and not making that big save. It's just 2 little saves, right? And Stoley will make like 3 of those in a game, and it's the difference maker. And everyone's talking about him like it gets that small of a deal. But yeah, when you look back to those big saves where it looks like they're kind of down and out, and he's got to spread and sprawl, and someone lost their assignment, and so and so's back door and gets a piece, and he gets there somehow. that's the difference in the game. It really is. And I think when you watch games that they lose and the goaltender wasn't really the story, they play just fine. It's just those 2 or 3 little saves that are such a difference maker. And Stoli just seems to come up big, making them every time.
By the way, if people don't think that Craig Berube has made a difference, think again. Can you remember the last time the Leafs are 23-0 when leading after 2? Because that's the story. It's the best in the NHL, and that is just night and day from previous iterations of this squad. Now, granted, again, all about the Stanley Cup playoffs, but man, that is a really, really good development. It tells me they go up and they don't lose that lead, which is great.
Yeah, because that's why that new philosophy, that north-south hockey, that, just being smarter on the blue, on the lines, like getting the red line, getting the blue line, in the offensive zone, making sure that gets out and you get that chip in your zone on your blue line. Like, they were kind of famous for being 2-3 feet away from that blue line. Oh no, I'm gonna spot pass, backhand this thing right to the middle because so and so must be coming here, and it stays in, and everyone's got to turn and go back, and you get hemmed in your zone a lot. That's the kind of stuff that happens when you're giving leads away and you give team life and momentum. And they used to do it. They used to do it all the time. No lead was safe. The betting line even knew it and wouldn't change that much when they had a 2-goal lead. And it's no longer, like you say, 23-0. That's like Tiger Woods with a lead on Sunday type of mastery of knowing how to stay in control when you get in control. And I think that also their lead, or their record while scoring 3 goals, is that not almost perfect as well?
Close
Those
enough. Yeah.
those are great stats that they need to lean on. They need to understand, and I hope they know those stats, because there's a reason it's happening, and they need to, continue with that type of play, with that type of mentality, and those types of habits that lead to those kind of numbers. And like you say, that is the Craig Berube effect right there. And if anyone wants to, question him or the way they play, I mean, that's playoff type of stuff. You get a lead, you don't relinquish it. And that's what gets you through a series. That's what gets you, the lead in a series. That's what gets you the 2-game lead. That's what gets you to tie a series up. That's what kind of stuff gets you to clinch it and close it out and get that 4th win in a series. That's big time stuff. And wicked stats to see the Leafs doing that, because like you said, they're not really known for that.
They're not. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button at the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube. So Mitch Marner comes back after a 1-game absence. Curious to find out, it wasn't blocking a shot. He just said he had a bit of a spasm just before the game or something like that, or earlier in the day, and couldn't play, which is fine. As you know, sometimes you need nights off, but he comes back, same old Mitchie. The fastest Leaf to notch 500 assists, man. Just think about that. This guy is a point-producing machine, Rosie.
He really is. That's a lot of appetizer for old Mitch Above there. He's a dishing master. He sees the game well, and he's a point producing machine. And when you put him up there with some of the greats of this organization, and I don't really think maybe it is. I don't know. It doesn't seem fair to compare like Mitch playing this day and age to Daryl Sittler playing in like the 70s. It's just like, what the hell? Everything is different. You watch those games, it's not even remotely the same kind of hockey, but sometimes the stats kind of line up. And you look at Gretzky's records and how Ovechkin's trying to, pass that and will pass that. It's kind of hard to believe that, the eras do actually kind of match up with the greats kind of being in the same ballpark. It's kind of shocking at times, but again, hats off for him. Point producing machine. And I've had my qualms about him and his style of play, I guess, in the playoffs, but regular season, there's no doubting Mitchie, man. He is a machine out there with all those apples.
And certainly there'll be plenty of conversation about that moving forward. But obviously, Mitch Marner playing in the Four Nations as well, and looking forward to that. I want to see him with elite talent, Crosby, guys like that, McDavid. Like, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch too.
Oh, big time. I was kind of ho-hum about it for the while, but as it's creeping up now, and it's next week now, I'm kind of like, oh, baby, this is going to be really fun to see these big boys in that jersey playing together. What are the lines? Who's got the cam? What kind of plays are we seeing? What style are they going to play? It's starting to get exciting. I'm on board.
I'm looking forward to that Canada-U.S. game, because coming up on Saturday, February 15th, presented by Fountain Tire, the Leafs Nation will be hosting a watch party at Greta Bar on King Street West as Canada and the U.S. duke it out at the Four Nations. We got ticket giveaways, signed memorabilia, trivia, and T-shirt tosses happening all night long. Join Zach Phillips and me for this 19-plus event as we cheer on Team Canada. Entry is free with a reservation. Doors open at 6. Puck drop is slated for just after 8. Grab your free ticket now at nationgear.ca as you bring in today's guest. Does not need an introduction at all. It is Peter Mansbridge. Peter, thank you so much for doing this. Did you stay up for that one? It was a late one.
It lasted 2 periods, and I kind of crashed in the intermission of the second. I mean, it wasn't the most exciting game I've ever seen, and it certainly wasn't the most exciting of the 3 we've watched on the West Coast swing so far. I'm actually going to be at the game tomorrow night in Vancouver. I'm flying out there later today to be a part of the Invictus Games opening tomorrow in Vancouver, and going straight from that over to watch the hockey game. So it should be I'm looking forward to that trip. Maybe the Leafs were just saving a little bit of energy for Vancouver.
We will see. They're trying to have a perfect road trip, which will be tough to do there in Vancouver. But, Peter, we had you on before in years past where team was a little bit different. You're watching. Do you notice this group looking a little different? Do you have more faith in them than maybe you have in the past? Or what do you see in this season?
I've certainly got a lot more third period faith in the team. And there's no, I don't know what their record is. And, going into the third leading, I think it's almost perfect. And I can feel that. I don't get all worked up like I used to not that long ago, when blowing leads in the third period was sort of a part of the Leafs motto, it seemed. But now I feel a lot more comfortable. It helps with the defensive style that Berube has brought in, but it also helps when you got 2 goalies who are amazing. Stolarz last night, what I saw was really top notch. Didn't look like he missed anything over the last couple of months. I think it was smart to play him last night. He was ready health wise, and so give him a game, especially a game that you figure you should be able to win without too much of a problem. But he looked good when he needed to look good. I was impressed.
You're dialed in on that number, by the way. They're 23-0-0 when leading after 2, which is, again, a far cry from the Keefe administration, much different under Berube. But you're right on the goaltending front. I think it just generates excitement, whether it's Woll there, whether it's Stoley. I can't believe this guy was hiding behind Sergei Bobrovsky in Florida all those years.
I find it stunning that nobody else went after him. I mean, if this is what he's like as a goalie year round and heading into the playoffs, the Leafs got him for a steal. It's like the McMahon contract. How they managed to pull those 2 off, because I'm sure other teams around the league would have paid a lot more for either one of those guys.
Had they known, right? It's so nice and refreshing when a player comes into Toronto and flourishes and plays above their contract. Because I have always found that a player will have a career year and they'll bring him to Toronto, and under that spotlight expect him to be even better, and it just never seems to happen. But nonetheless, you've done so many interviews in your career. Did you like doing athletes? Did you find that you covered some pretty heavy and important stuff? Did you like doing athletes in one-on-one conversations? Yeah. And if so, who do you think would be a good interview on the Maple Leafs this year?
When you watch the Leafs in interviews, it's a struggle. There are guys like Austin, as much as I admire him, and Mitch, same thing. You don't get much out of those interviews, although I'll give Austin credit for the way he handled the whole booing thing the other night. Good for him. I interviewed Pacioretty when he was captain of the Habs when Beliveau died, and he was great. And he tends to kind of think through his answers. He gives you exactly what he's thinking. He doesn't seem to sort of go into the comms approach to the things they should say. I've interviewed Sid quite a few times, right back to his first year in the league. Those are tough. Bobby Orr, I've got to know really well. Bobby's a friend of mine. We have our arguments about politics. We'll leave that aside. But he hates doing interviews. But when his book came out about whenever it was, about 10 years ago, he agreed to do an interview with me because somebody told him, you two will get along, and we did, and we still do. I talk to him all the time. And he was a good interview, but none of them are great interviews. And plus, there's a bit of fanboy in me as well, having grown up, following the Leafs and being a big fan of the Leafs in the late 50s and 60s. So there's still that element to me when I talk to some of these guys. But it's not like you're sitting down expecting, the inner workings of rocket science or brain surgery. You're talking about a hockey game, and the best way to play it. And sometimes trying to get that out of these guys, especially immediately after a game. Either they're in a good mood or they're in a bad mood. So I have some faith in them to be able to navigate those waters. It's got to be tough, especially if you lose a close one or you've made a particularly, bad move in your game, and suddenly the mics are thrust in front of you, and you see the exasperation on some of their faces every once in a while.
You do. And this question comes from the chat, who is giving me grief right now that I don't ask questions from the chat. So here it is. You get a chance to do, hypothetically, a one-on-one with Mitch Marner. You know everything that's going on this season. What kind of questions are you asking?
I think you got to approach where his head's at in terms of his future. I understand that's a tough position to put him in. He's got an agent, and he's got a father who's obviously particularly interested in what's happening with him. And so he's trying to duck that. I understand that, but I don't think you can approach an interview with Mitch any other way at the moment. Obviously you talk to him about the Four Nations thing and how he's feeling about that. And whatever was happening, the first thing that went through my mind the other day when they said he wasn't going to be playing at night and really didn't say anything more than that, I thought, here it is. The moment has arrived. There's a trade. They've got some big blockbuster trade going on.
Wow.
And I tried to think through that one myself. Like, how do I really feel about that? Do we really want to get rid of Mitch Marner, who, as Jay just mentioned a few moments ago, is one of the most exciting players in the league for the things he can do and the way he can set up plays and just the way he can dominate on the ice? Or is this the time? Is this the time where we got to make some huge move? Because as confident as I am in the kind of new Leaf look, I don't take that so far as to say, boy, we're a lock on a second, third, maybe even fourth round in the playoffs. I'm not there yet. I got to see more, and I'm just wondering whether, what are the pieces or piece that we're missing?
Yeah, it is an anomaly, isn't it, with these high-end players that you're so thrilled to have, and yet they fall short every time. It's difficult conversation to have. I think that's why it's so polarizing. But speaking of really good players, this Four Nations face-off is coming up. Team Canada, a bit of a dropped ball in the World Juniors, pretty disappointing for everyone in the nation, I think. And time for some redemption here. Are you going to be watching that? And what's your take on what the level of competition is going to be and how hard these guys are going to go during this, ultimately an exhibition?
I think they'll go hard. These guys, you know them, Jay. You know what it's like to be in uniform on the ice, and even a hint of the possibility that you could play with your nation's emblem on your jersey. They're going to be into it. Nobody's going to be sort of dogging it in this series. I worry about just one aspect of our team, and that's the net. Especially when you look at what the Americans have got. But in a series like that, things can change. People who you least expected it, can become heroes. And especially when you're carrying the nation's flag. And others who you expected from can turn up not playing the way that was expected of them. But in terms of the talent on the lines and on the defense, man, there's some great players in this series. Obviously we'd all love it if all the nations were represented, if Russia was there with a team of some of their great players. But listen, it seems almost certain that we're looking at a Canada-US series Whether it ends up that way in the final game or not, I don't know. But those games, given everything else that's happening between our two countries right now, those are going to be intense. And it's going to be awfully strange to be sitting there watching, Austin on the other side, and some of the other great NHL players who you don't normally think of as American. You just think of them as hockey players, and I think most Canadians it'll come as a shock to them to see some of those who are lined up on the U.S. side, because they're U.S. born players at a time when U.S. born players are really having their moment in the NHL. So am I excited? I am excited. I'm like Jay, and I'm sure you too, Nick. I'm really looking forward to this, and I can't wait for it to get going. Although it would be nice to see the Leafs win one more game before that starts.
With you in attendance, of course. And you're so right on the Four Nations. Like, I won't lie, like, it kind of scares me. I love Austin Matthews, but I think the key for Canada is to run that team out of the building and finish your checks. And it's like, I don't want the check finished on Austin Matthews. I think that's the whole problem with this whole scenario. But you've been referencing it throughout the interview. What have you made of everything over the last couple of weeks with the anthems being booed here in Canada?
I don't like the anthems being booed. I do think that takes it to a new level. I understand the frustration that many Canadians are having, but I mean, look at who you're booing. When you look down on the ice and you're booing the American anthem, how do you think Austin feels, or any of the other players? Joseph Wall, he's American, isn't he? And
Yep.
Stoley's American. I mean, how do you feel? How do you think those guys feel? I thought Austin expressed it well by basically just passing on the question. But I think you can make your point by being silent in the American anthem and really going for broke on the Canadian anthem. It'll be interesting to see the contrast between Boston and Montreal. The patriotism surge is up all across this country, and that includes in Quebec in big numbers. So we'll see how that anthem situation plays out there. I mean, listen, we all want to see good hockey. That's what it comes down to. Sure, we want our sides to win, but at the end of the day, we want to be able to say that was a fantastic series. That was great hockey. I'll remember the rest of my life. Remember the New Year's Eve game one year between Russia and the Habs? I think you got to go back in somewhere in the 80s. For that one, but it was a huge thing that for years later, everybody remembered. It wasn't for anything in particular. It wasn't for a Canada Cup or anything. It was just a game, but it was a game that everybody watched and they loved it because it was fantastic hockey. So I think that's what we're hoping for in this series, that we're all moved by the game itself and how it's played. Obviously, we hope our side wins, just as they hope their side wins, whatever country they're cheering for. But we want to see good hockey.
Yeah, and Peter, like, speaking of having the best hockey, I know it's tough when politics cross into sports, but as a man who's been very involved in world events, do you think that Russia should be playing in a tournament like this?
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about this about the whole Ukraine situation. I mean, Russia invaded another country, a sovereign country, and different people, different associations, different sports leagues made decisions based on that. I don't think anybody assumed it was going to last as long as it has. We're coming up on the third anniversary of that invasion. It's probably going to take place the anniversary will take place right in the middle of the Four Nations thing, and it'll be a reminder of why they aren't there. But listen, it would be a better series if they were there. And so I think hopefully this is going to end and they'll be back in, whether it's the Olympics next year or another kind of Four Nations or something similar series in the future.
Looking forward to this tournament. Also, kudos to you for heading out to the game tomorrow. Enjoy it and appreciate your time today, as always.
Thanks, guys. I always love talking to you. It's great. Take care.
You as well.
Thanks a lot,
Peter
Peter.
Mansbridge. There you go. One of our favorites here at Leafs Morning Take. Just brings the heat, man. Versatility. Love versatility. Can cover all avenues, Rosie.
Easy guy to talk to. Hey, he's done a million of those, and it's fun when he's talking about something that he's obviously passionate and knowledgeable about, which is probably just about everything with what he's done in his career. But yeah, wasn't sure if I was going to put him on the spot there with that Russian business or not. But I was curious on his take, as he's an expert for many years in world events, as he covered all that on the national. So I think a pretty obvious and agreeable response from him as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we said before he came on, it's creeping up on that Four Nations, man. It's getting kind of exciting. I'm going to admit it.
The chat's horny today, man. They're giving me shit. Apparently, I only talk about the people who troll us. So that's why I felt the need to get the Marner question. I thought was a fair question. Sixhole writes in, Rosie passing a hot potato to Peter there.
I know.
That's in one today, man.
As if he can't handle that.
Oh, wait. I just got this text from Peter Mansbridge. Lose my number. Your co-host is an idiot. No, I'm kidding.
I think he can handle
I think he gets
that.
it. Yeah.
As he did clearly. But yeah, as I'm like, I'm wondering if he's not going to want to have that ask, but screw it. We're hard-hitting journalists here on Leafs Morning Take.
Something like that. We're going to get to take it or leave it in seconds here, but I want to get your thoughts on Domi staying with Matthews and Nyes. We talked about that a bit, but the super line. Like, you have so much talent on one line, Rosie. I'm sorry. They should be dominating. I barely noticed that line together. I barely did.
With Domi on it?
No, the one with Marner, JT, and Nylander, the all-star line.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes Marner's like that, and he gets his first and second apples just kind of being the guy that makes the play and allows other people to finish it. So you don't notice that too much. Tavares, sometimes, with his speed, if he's not in the right spots, you might not notice him too much. And like you mentioned, Willie, I mean, I'm not going to take one breath to knock Willie or anything with what he's been doing recently. But like you mentioned, he's kind of fighting the puck a little bit and probably didn't feel himself. But man, when you're playing 82 games and the span of time that they do, and you've got the travel going on, which they mentioned, you're playing unfamiliar barns, I kind of give them a pass. And I mean, if they don't have their best out of their super line and they're still winning 3-1 on the road to have their third straight victory on the road, I mean, that's a pretty good place to be. So I'm not too worried about it. You look at that top line, I understand why they're trying to get Domi going. It's just, I'm still curious as to what the lines are going to be. And I hope that post trade deadline, we get some lines and they don't change. You get the lines. These are your lines now. Figure stuff out, what works best, talk amongst each other, practice together, watch video together, and get some chem going down the stretch here when it comes to crunch time in the playoffs.
In support of Sick Kids, Michael Dix writes in our favorite name here in the chat, having a beer for the boys at the game tomorrow. So Peter Mansbridge and your boy Michael Dix will be at the game.
I thought old Dixie was having a beer for breakfast, is what he was saying during Leafs Morning Take. I wonder how many beers.
I think he's having a beer 24/7, but that has to be his nickname. It's got to be Dixie, right?
Good stuff. I would hope so. I would certainly hope so.
Michael, can you confirm your nickname is Dixie with the boys? That's all we need to know here in the pod. You ready for Take It or Leave It?
Yeah, Thursday. Let's do it. Or no, Friday.
Okay. Number one. It's Friday, buddy.
Oh, gotcha.
Did you say Thursday?
I thought we did this every Thursday. I don't know.
No, it's Friday. I think we changed it to Fridays. I don't know. We do it once a week.
Hit me with it.
Okay. Number one, the Leafs will acquire a top 6 center between now and March 7th. Take it or leave it.
I'm going to leave it because they're going to acquire a bottom 6 center if they're lucky. It's just what I think. I think they're going to be tough to come by. We talked about the cap crunches. We talked about what we have to give up. I don't think you're getting a top 6 center. I think you're going to get a bottom 6. I think you want to get a 3C, and I think that's going to be good enough, and it's going to be all you can get, and I think it's what they need.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it too. I've been poking around, talking to some people, and it's going to be hard for the Leafs to do something substantial. I know they're going to be linked to everybody and their mother, money in, money out, subtraction, addition. I'd be fine with Jake Evans. I think it's Jake Evans, Ryan Donato, that type. It sounds like the Maple Leafs would be involved in, but you never know what can transpire. Somebody can go down, LTIR. Like, there's a lot of moving parts over the next couple weeks, but I'm going to leave it. I do think they acquire a center, but it's going to be a third line center or a fourth line center. and they'll find a way to make that work moving forward. Again, the salary cap going up, so that's good news as well. Number 2, Toronto will square off with Ottawa in round 1. Take it or leaf it.
I'm going to leave that as well, as they dropped both games to the Lightning here and tied in points with the Lightning having 2 games in hand. I think they went on their little run. That was impressive. I think they've got some building blocks to be good in the near future, but I don't think they're going to keep the steam coming down the stretch here to sneak in there and face the Leafs, although that would be a pretty neat storyline.
I'm going to go with take it. I think Ottawa makes the playoffs. I think the Leafs finish first in the Atlantic Division. I think they meet up as the wild card, and the Leafs is the number 1 team in the Atlantic Division.
God, some about that's kind of scurry. Like
Every team scares me, dude. I don't care. I'm fearless. Play anybody.
To Chuck, like, with reason to be pissed off and getting a team on his back, and oh God, I don't love it. And then you've got, who they've ran into in Boston in between the pipes there, who's back now from injury.
Allmark.
Allmark, a guest on this show previously. I could see him you could just run into some problems like that. I don't like it. I'd rather face Tampa personally, but you got to beat the best and you got to beat anybody and whatever. Like I always say, you got to show up, worry about yourself. If you take care of business on your own end, you should be able to beat anybody if you believe in yourself. We'll see what happens. Interesting storyline though.
Weirdly, the only team I would feel comfortable playing out of any playoff team right now is the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have won 1 billion Stanley Cups in the last decade. But I for some reason, it feels like the Leafs have that team's number and they just beat them and they beat them and they beat them. And like the demon was exercised when they finally beat them in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs a couple years ago. Third and final one, Canada will not lose a game at the Four Nations. Take it or leaf it.
Well, my immediate thought is, we'll leaf it. Like, let's go. This is a big tournament with big time people. You expect to run the table. They have their deficiencies between the pipes. It's like, well, no, you can't expect them to do that. But then it's like, I think they should beat the other 2 teams, and it might just be a tough battle against the States. And I'm not going to sit here and go, they're not going to beat the States, and I'm going to be cheering for them during that big game coming up. So I'm going to say take it. I think they can run the table, and it just depends on what kind of chem they get going and what level they're playing at in D, and obviously goaltending. But I guess after I think about it a little harder, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I'm taking it too. If there's anybody I believe in, it's John Cooper, who's my boy, of course, and Team Canada in general at the national stage, at the top elite stage. They just don't lose until they give me reason to deny that and bet against them. I'm not going to. You have so many damn gamers, and I mean, there's a lot of concern with Sidney Crosby right now. Seeing him skate on Thursday, my oh my, does not look good. But the U.S. is banged up too, man. Like I got word last night, Quinn Hughes has an oblique injury. I mean, I don't know how he's playing in that tournament. They haven't ruled him out, but an oblique is a pretty serious injury. And to be playing in a best on best, that's going to be difficult. Zach Werenski missed a game earlier this week. Like the Canadians are not the only team with injury concerns. And I think like the States have a lot more to prove at this level than Canada does. Like a lot of these guys have won before. If you tally all the Stanley Cups too, I have faith. I have faith in this team. I know people are making a lot about the crease, but dude, Aiden Hill won a Stanley Cup with Vegas. Like the crease, we're making too much of that conversation. When you have an all-star blue line and all-stars up front, I mean, you could have anybody in there. You could have Michael Hutchinson. That's a random guy I picked. You can have Ilya Samsonov. You're going to win. So I like Canada. I know I'm biased because I'm Canadian, but I'm taking that, baby. They're not losing in this tourney.
Hey, for a jaded pessimist, I like your optimism on the Team Canada front. I don't know. There's firepower on the other side, man, and they're going to get their looks. And a goaltender's going to have to make some big saves, as we talked about earlier in the show. It's just that 1 or 2 saves is going to be the difference maker. So we'll see if they're up for it. But yeah, I have this feeling that if they don't get it done, that goaltending situation may very well be the story. But like you said, they are capable goaltenders that any one of them could easily get hot and stand on their head for a short tournament like that. That's why we're going to watch. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and quite honestly, if they don't win this tournament, I'll be like, whatever. Like the Olympics is the real tournament anyways, so.
Except when Russia can't play because they've been bad.
Yes. Yeah, are we ever going to see Russia again in our lifetime? Like, I think it's so crazy that, like, imagine you can insert, like, Kucherov into this tournament or all 17 of those all-star netminders. Like, can we have Igor Shesterkin on Team Canada? Can we do that?
No, we can't. But this shit'll blow over, and eventually they will be back in it. And I think that'll add some legitimacy to this tournament if they continue to move forward with it.
I want to get Willie Nylander on Team Canada. He was born in Calgary. Okay.
I know it's kind of unfortunate.
Some
Hey,
Brett
but,
Hall stuff right there, buddy. Remember Brett? Like, I don't know if you recall this in the 90s and the 2000s. It was always like, will Brett Hall play for Canada? And people were like, why is he playing for the States? Like the same type of, like less of a conversation. But I always remember that as a kid. Like people just talk about Brett Hall being a Canadian. I was like,
yeah,
what?
I remember that as a kid. I remember not
Yeah.
liking him just
Yeah.
because my dad said, "Oh, he's a traitor." So I
Yeah.
was like, "Damn
Yeah.
traitor!" I didn't have a clue what anyone's talking about. But I didn't
Yeah.
like Brett Hall growing up for that reason only, as my dad just mentioned that he went to play for the States. But I remember reading or hearing an interview about why that kind of came to be and how he got pissed off and went down there, and
Yeah.
it seemed like it makes sense at the time. But nonetheless, there are some people that kind of have that autonomy.
Lastly, we have had some updates from producer Vic, who is in Africa, like Seychelles. Is that what the place is called? Like, have you seen some of the vids coming on Instagram from producer Vic, like in paradise right now with his wife?
He's got money coming out of his ears and he's just throwing it around the world right now, isn't he? Good for you, Vic. You deserve it.
Well, you've got to get paid a lot of money to do this podcast and work with us.
We've been through a couple producers, haven't we?
Yeah, we're diva. We're producer killers, man. We're on like our third producer in like 3 years. We're divas. We're tough to work with.
Vic's got her on the rails, though. I hope he's enjoying his little breaky poo. And that poor girl, she must be put through the ringer with that guy. Congratulations to the newlyweds.
That wedding was phenomenal. I'm still recovering a week later. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet in a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. That's NATION, NATION. Anything you want to give? Why don't you give me a Super Bowl pick, since that's happening on Sunday, right?
Oh, a Super Bowl pick.
So, dude, I got to ask you a question, not to interrupt. I have a ticket plus 450 that I put money down in December on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. This is when people were, I don't know, they were counting them out. I'm like, screw that. The Chiefs always win. So I put money on them. Do I ride or do I fade it?
Oh, I would ride that if you've got it at plus 450. I mean, I think it's a coin toss. I'm not like a football guru, especially this year, but it's just hard to fade the Chiefs, man. Their record speaks for themselves. You can say the refs are on their side or whatever, but they find a way to get it done, and they're very experienced in this. So are the Eagles on the other side, but I don't have a pick for who's going to win. But Saquon Barkley on the Eagles, he is just a menace out there. I got him for 2 touchdowns
Oh,
in the
my.
Super Bowl, and that's pretty decent money too. I think it's plus 4 or something rather. I can't remember. I'll look into it, but take him for 2. It'll be worth your money.
Yeah, he's got like hockey player legs, doesn't he?
I'm not sure. Skinny calves?
He's got like big thighs, like
Yeah.
the Crosby thighs. Like Leo Komarov, you didn't play with him, right?
No, I didn't.
Leo Komarov, one time I was like going to the room and I saw him, like, I don't know why, he was like just in his gitch, and I'm like, dude, this guy's legs were like huge. But that's like a theme, right?
Well, Nikolai Kulemin,
Yeah.
like he couldn't even sit down without his legs smashing together, no matter how wide they were, because his thighs were so big. There's that famous picture of Ovechkin. He's wearing, it's like early on in his career, and they're at a bar and they racked up this huge tab, and you look at the booze the tab they racked up an outrageous amount of money, and there's a picture of them sitting at this Peeler's Club or somebody's in those awful jeans that are ripped to shreds, and you can see his legs, and they look like telephone posts, man. I don't know, those guys from over that way, they I don't know what they're doing, but they're breeding some pretty big thighs, which was good for the power on the ice.
Your boy, did you go full Arnold there?
I know. I think I was trying to do a Russian one. I did an Austrian one.
Yeah. Your boy's going to get there, man. He need like 16 tucks in 29 games. Like it is wild what Alex Ovechkin is doing. I can picture him just doing it and just see you later. Check, please, back to Russia.
He's scoring at like, I don't know, I can't remember, 18% or something like that. And in his prime, he was like 12, 13. It's like, how are you playing at this level, at this age, when the league is as good as it is and everybody's as good as it is? He's a machine. I think he needs He needs to mix in a hat trick and a couple 2-goal games to kind of make it realistic. But it sucks because it's going to come down to the wire, I think. And I don't know if they're going to want to ride the horse as hard as they did Austin Matthews last year, trying to get him 70. But it would certainly be better if he could do it this year than next. But man, it's right on the cusp. I wonder what the odds are. It's doable, but it's going to be difficult. It's incredible what he's doing.
The added intrigue is the Caps may very well win the Stanley Cup. They're that good. Like they're stacked, that team. They're playing so well, so much confidence. And I think you got to rest a guy who's getting old for the Stanley Cup playoffs, funny enough. Isaac Vondon writes in, thick thighs save lives. I agree with that. Total Gamer 1, Baltic lower bodies are nuts. But just lastly, Rosalie, some housekeeping notes. As mentioned, I'm going to head off to Florida for a couple days. We're going to be off. We're going to take Monday and Tuesday off. So the show is going to return on Wednesday. Zach Phillips is going to fill in for me, and you guys are going to preview Canada and Sweden, I believe, to kick off the Four Nations on Wednesday. How's that sound?
Cool. Maybe I should go do something neato if you're going to go. By the way, PSA, Nick's looking for a date to the Panthers game next week. Wants to bring
tomorrow. It's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. He wants to bring a sweet young lady, maybe find love, who knows, but he's got a very fancy ticket from the owner of the Panthers, and he needs someone on his arm for that lovely evening out. So if you are in the Florida area and think that big browed bastard might be a good time, hit his DMs up. You're welcome.
Just unlock everything about me in that whole little monologue.
I think you're gonna find somebody. You're a master getter of people, and
it's called producing.
Not just in the interview world of Leafs Morning Take, also in your personal life.
Dude, my issue with this Panthers arena, it's so far from Fort Lauderdale, man. Like
it is.
That's the great thing is they sent me tickets, but also a parking pass because they know. I don't have a car, so got to find a car.
You're going to be on the Lime scooter out to Sunrise on the shoulder, everyone honking at you. With your little sweetie piggybacking you in the back that you found on Bumble. Yes, I can see it right now.
I'll have an update for you folks next week. So Rosie and Zach in on Wednesday. We got lots planned. The Four Nations. We're going to pretty much morph into a Four Nations show, and Rosie's going to break down shift by shift Mitch Marner for Team Canada. So can't wait for that next week. Rosie, great stuff, buddy.
Same to you, and same to Peter Mansbridge. It's been a week, man, and I guess we got an extended break, so hopefully all you guys miss us. Sign up for the Nation Vacation, and we will see you next week.
Leafs and Canucks. Can't wait for that one. Can't wait for Canucks fans to bitch and complain about the start time. Just one more for the Leafs. Win 4 in a row. It always feels a bit different, a bit better beating the Vancouver Canucks, who weirdly enough playing much better after trading JT Miller. So we'll look at that game coming up on Saturday night. Thank you to everybody in the chat. As Rosie mentioned, at the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Again, as mentioned, thank you to Peter Mansbridge, producer Andy. Great job this week. Back next week. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga. Take care. Have a great weekend. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.